Production of Kansas City Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
This week, an unexpected departure in Shawnee Mission. Why this Missouri playground is at the center of national news. And 17 months after the mayor launches a citizens task force to examine worsening crime in Kansas City, the recommendations finally released. Welcome, I'm Nick Haynes. Those stories and much more straight ahead on the program that connects the dots on the news of the week in this place we call home. From the Shawnee Mission Post, Jay Center is with us. From 41 Action News, reporter Brian Abel. From the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. And Pitch contributing writer Barbara Shelley. Were headache-inducing debates over school funding or lingering complaints over his safety pin policy just too much? The head of the Metro's third largest school district is calling it quits. Jim Hinson announcing his retirement as head of Shawnee Mission Schools 4 years after hopping the state line where he had been leading the Independence District. Hinson says he wants to spend more time with his family. Can there be a more cliche explanation for his departure? Jay?
I think it's fair to say that there was something more to it than wanting to spend more time with his family. Over the course of the past, say, 6 months or a year, it had become pretty clear that he had rubbed significant portions of pretty much every constituency he served the wrong way. Teachers, building administrators, coaches, and parents. And I think what you saw was that he was hearing it, and the Board of Education, frankly, was hearing it from several different directions. And I think it appears that it's at least very possible that he decided that it was just no longer tenable to be able to continue to enact the agenda that he had.
But this is a position that pays $250,000 a year, Brian Abel, and he's a young man, 54 years old.
And this contract was recently approved until 2020. So to Jay's point, absolutely, there's something more here. What that is yet is going to require some more digging, I think.
Okay, Barbara.
I don't know that he needs to be too worried about the pay issue, because having served, in education as many years as he has, both in the Missouri and Kansas systems, he's probably going to be okay with retirement pay. To add to Jay's constituencies, legislatures in his district were also very disenchanted with him and the way he supported Governor Brownback's block grant funding formula. And yeah, he was under fire. He's a very interesting superintendent, was, always in the middle of things in Missouri with independence, and then he went over to Kansas and was, kind of in the heat of things there too. And if nothing else, he's a newsmaker that we're going to lose.
Well, the Kansas Association of School Superintendents said the average length of a tenure for a superintendent across the country is about 4 years. So are we making too much of this, Dave?
No, I mean, it's a tough job, but the Shawnee Mission District does have some history of having longer tenured superintendents. It isn't the kind of controversial job usually that you would find in Kansas City, Missouri, or an urban district. But I think Barb said something very important. I do think that he was seen as a bit of an outlier among state legislators as they're trying to cobble together a very difficult, very complex school finance formula for the state. And there was enormous pressure for everyone in the Johnson County area to sing from the same sheet of music in order to achieve the formula that would most benefit those students. And for whatever reason, Superintendent Hinson was seen outside of that circle to some degree, more sympathetic maybe to the governor than he should have been, and that, I think, added to the load of bricks in his backpack.
In headlines, we like to say, surprise, shock announcement. But people close to the Shawnee Mission School District, was it that much of a surprise? Did some people know about this beforehand, Jay?
I think it was very much a surprise to the rank and file district employees. I mean, after the announcement came out Wednesday, our email inbox was full of people basically saying, I am gasping, I cannot believe that this has just happened, because he is a very assertive leader. He sets an agenda, and he has taken very, very definitive actions to try to enact it. And so the idea that he would suddenly be pulling back from that with basically several things that he had set out to accomplish still unfinished was very, very surprising. But what I think, maybe the fallout of this is a lot of the people that he has put in place. I mean, he's brought in a very different staff to the district than had been there prior to his arrival. They're going to take some really hard looks at, especially the growth of some of the administrative positions that he's brought in. So, I mean, you could be seeing a pretty big change in Shawnee Mission over the course of the next couple of years.
It's not often that a case from this neck of the woods makes it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. But this week, the justices, including its newest member, Neil Gorsuch, begin hearing the case of a Missouri playground that some legal analysts claim tests the limits of the separation of church and state in this country. The playground is part of a church preschool in Columbia, Missouri. Church officials applied for a state grant to rubberize the playground surface using shredded tires to make it safer for their children. But the state turned down the application, citing language in the Missouri Constitution explicitly prohibiting states' funds from going to religious groups. So what's at stake here? Does the state giving a church preschool $20,000 to spread shredded tires on its playground promote religion and crumble the separation of church and state, Barbara?
I guess that depends on whose attorney you're listening to and the arguments in front of the Supreme Court. Yeah, it's really kind of a quirky and fascinating case. And it's like, you know, no one really objects to this particular playground getting rubberized tires so the kids don't hurt their knees when they fall, et cetera. But, you know, I think people say, well, if you know, give government taxpayer money to a religious institution that is tax exempt, you know, what's next? And of course, the end road to this is the school vouchers and, you know, taxpayer money for private schools.
So it's not just the $20,000 for the shredded tires then,
Right.
Dave. There are more implications?
Well, right. Of course, it's one of the most important freedom of religion cases to come to the court in decades because of what it implies, not necessarily the specifics, but whether or not states can refuse to fund certain religious activities and programs, and the Supreme Court will decide that question and may decide it broadly. Many people expect a 5-4 decision because Neil Gorsuch is now in the court. Let's also throw in another important thing. Governor Eric Greitens, a couple of weeks before this case was heard, made an announcement that his administration would indeed consider religious applications for programs like this. It's hard to overestimate how unwelcome that intervention was as a political matter, because it may lead the court to simply say, well, this is no longer a controversy, we're going to not decide the case. It will almost certainly result in additional lawsuits from the other side who will say the governor's decision violates the state's constitution. He only had to wait a little bit, and it would have been much safer for him to make that announcement. The governor's obsession with politics is really hurting his ability to govern. And I think this was a key example of that.
There were just a couple of comments made by the Supreme Court justices on this case that I thought was kind of interesting. One was that the religious school in Missouri, for instance, would be entitled to police and fire protection, but they would be denied money to make its playground safer. What's the difference? And the other thing they pointed out was that there are government programs that give grants to reinforce security at synagogues and mosques in Missouri that are at risk of terrorist attacks. So is the line between church and state already being blurred?
Right. We wrote an editorial on this which suggested that the state of Missouri should get rid of this amendment in its constitution because it's so broad. The Missouri Constitution says no state aid, direct or indirect, which covers just about everything: a new sidewalk, a stoplight, a police officer.
Fire service, right.
Right. So that's really the crux of the issue as to whether or not there's a disregard for law embedded in the Missouri Constitution. I think the court will rule on that basis if it rules, but as I suggest, they do have an out if they want to take it.
Let's move back to Kansas now, where lawmakers are back in their home districts, having adjourned their legislative session. Yet most of the big issues of the session still unresolved, still no long-term budget fix, and no solution for funding schools. Even though, Jay, the Kansas Supreme Court says they'll shut down classrooms at the end of June if lawmakers don't find an answer?
Yeah, the veto session, when it reconvenes, is going to be very, very contentious because they have the biggest issues facing the state staring them down. The frustration to constituents, however, is that these are not surprises. These things didn't spring out of nowhere. The school funding bill in particular, the governor championed the block grant funding bill back in 2015 because it was going to give them this 2-year period where they could all sit back and really think through this. Here we are, yet again, staring down a deadline, no plan in place.
Oh, by the way, Brian, it was Jim Hinson of the Shawnee Mission superintendent was retiring in June, so he wouldn't have to face this problem.
Maybe that was part of the calculation. Who knows? He was so far out in front of this, though, this whole issue of school funding. So once again, interesting factor there. But what I find significant about this is that we are once again in a legislature that may be going into overtime, and we're so far back from that moment, and we're already thinking that that's a probability instead of a possibility.
Well, there's no school funding formula yet. They really haven't resolved the budget yet. They've got these tax issues yet. Medicaid expansion might come back. So I can't imagine the legislatures are thinking of getting out early this year.
Well, let's not think, though, that it's all been gloom and doom and nothing has been done. There have been wins. The governor signing legislation this week liberalizing liquor laws in the state. Missouri residents are accustomed to buying all manner of alcohol in grocery stores, convenience stores, and even at Target and Walmart. Not so in Kansas. There, those retailers can only sell low-alcohol beer, what they call 3-2 beer. This new law changes that so grocery stores can, for the first time, start buying full-strength ale. And to prevent an uprising from liquor store owners, they're now able for the first time to sell items other than alcohol, like ice, mixer drinks, cigarettes, and lottery tickets. Why was this considered so important, Dave Helling, given all the basket of issues they're dealing with?
Well, the liquor people have been fighting for this for, it seems like, decades. I mean, this has been on the agenda down in Topeka as long as I think I've been covering politics, because there's a lot of money at stake, and you know, the liquor business is a big business, and people spend a lot of money there. But the reality is that all legislators can chew gum and walk at the same time. Legislation like this it follows a path along with school funding and other issues that the legislature is considering. They passed new amusement park regulations after the Schlitterbahn tragedy. The governor is expected to sign that bill, so it's not unique. But this point needs to be made. All of the remaining problems are interconnected. They're money and school finance and Medicaid expansion and tax policy are all linked. You can't really solve one without the other. You and I could write a school finance formula if we had unlimited amounts of money. We just say, give it all to the schools and they'd be happy. But we don't have unlimited amounts of money. Until all of the problems are solved, none of them will be solved, and that's why the session may go on for a while.
Jay.
Well, that is very, very true. However, you know, the tax getting the tax plan knocked out it appears to be getting maybe a little bit easier. The Budget Committee just came out yesterday and had revised estimates that suggested that there were, you know, I think $165 million more available. But it still gets down to the bottom line of the governor and the moderate coalition of Democrats and moderate Republicans have got to be able to come to the table and finish up some deal.
The governor wants a public relations victory, and he wants to either keep the LLC exemption for businesses or go to a flat tax, which is what surfaced at the end. Neither of those solutions is acceptable to the moderates and the Democrats. They want a third bracket added in. They want the LLC exemption removed from state law. Until that fundamental disagreement is solved and the votes are found to override a gubernatorial veto, that problem won't be solved, and that won't make it easier to solve school.
Dave Helling already mentioned the governor ready to sign a tightening of amusement park regulations in Kansas after last year's Schlitterbahn tragedy. But if these new changes were in place, would it have prevented that tragedy from happening?
No, the answer is no, probably. As we've tried to write a little bit, the problem at the Schlitterbahn seems to be one of design and not maintenance. We don't know for sure because all of the investigative material hasn't been made available, but it doesn't seem as if it was a malfunction due to bad maintenance. It was a design problem. And that remains unaddressed. We've written that should be a federal responsibility, that someone should start reviewing these designs to make sure these rides are safe.
Your local members of Congress have all been home over the last 2 weeks. as part of an extended Easter break from Capitol Hill. Not many of them, though, going out holding town hall meetings with constituents. Missouri U.S. Senator Claire McCaskill, a rare exception. She's just wrapped up a week-long series of public town halls across the state.
I'm going to places that are not big Democratic counties. Every place I'm stopping, President Trump won by a wide margin. But that doesn't mean I can't show up. And if they want to chew on me, if they want to criticize me, if they want conflict, they're entitled to that. I work for them. So I think it's too bad that people are hiding behind spokespeople and locking doors to the press and refusing to answer questions. I need to answer your questions, but more importantly, I need to answer their questions.
Brian Abel, you were at several of those town halls. She even got standing ovations at some of them, but where were the protesters?
Well, even when she was taking heat, Nick, it was from friendly fire. I mean, most of the folks in those crowds were supporters of Claire McCaskill. And I thought basically the one flare-up I saw at the two different town halls was over Keystone Pipeline. That was about it.
Which she voted for, which would presumably be against her Democratic base.
Right, and that's why there was that friction there. But this is an easy win for her PR-wise, because even though she's going in here, she knows that her Republican colleagues are not showing up at these right now. They're using those controlled environments of social media and other means like that. So why not get out in front, say, hey, here I am, and use that as a platform to criticize her colleagues in front of a 2018 election coming up.
You know, a new poll finds that McCaskill is actually the 5th most unpopular senator on Capitol Hill. It's the same survey that's been naming Sam Brownback the most unpopular governor in America, though that's changed in the latest poll. He surrenders that title to New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. But back to McCaskill. What accounts for her low showing, Barbara?
Well, that's a really good question, but, you know, her unfavorability ratings are really quite in line with Roy Blunt's as well. So maybe it's a Missouri thing. You know, we are the show-me state, and perhaps our senators aren't showing enough for people's
Is that troubling for her, though, as she looks towards re-election next year?
Well, Donald Trump carried Missouri by 20 points. That's troubling for any Democrat, and I think the numbers reflect that to some degree, Nick. Plus, there's a great anti-incumbent feeling in the state of Missouri. Roy Blunt almost fell to that against Jason Kander in a state, again, that Trump carried by 20 points. Blunt won by 3. That shows you the anti-incumbent fever is pretty high. But the potential challengers to Claire McCaskill, Josh Hawley and Ann Wagner, are both in office now. They won't have that sort of outsider approach. So I think we should wait until 2018 to see what happens.
Why aren't we seeing our Kansas side congressmen and senators or any other Missouri senators and congressmen doing the same thing during the Easter break from Washington? Did Kevin Yoder in Kansas not do them because he has one eye on the governor's mansion in Topeka, Jay?
Very possibly. I mean, the downside for Kevin Yoder of showing up at a town hall meeting, and there have been several that have been organized basically to provide him with the opportunity should he desire to show up, and he has said no to all of them. The downside is very, very big. You would get a visual and a storyline that's like Jason Chaffetz in Utah with people yelling things at you. So he has sort of suggested that he is using these telephone town halls that have just an abysmal format. It's impossible for anybody to actually get a real question.
Is that only true, though, if you're a Republican? Because clearly Claire McCaskill did it.
Well, Kevin Yoder won by 11%. It was a 51% vote. So he has more to lose than to win, I think, at this point. And that's a calculation that he's using when he decides not to come to these town halls.
Barbara.
Well, I actually went to the town hall for Kevin Yoder on Wednesday night this week, and, you know, he didn't show, of course, so they put a little cartoon of him and propped it up there. But I kind of disagree a little bit. I actually think he would get some props for showing up. Kevin Yoder is very good at handling himself in front of crowds. He's not likely to fall into some of the traps of some of these other that we've seen around the country. It actually, you know, well, it was not a Yoder crowd, but it was an amiable crowd that was ready to listen respectfully. I think he would have done something.
But he said he has done telephone town halls that are far more effective because more people are going to be on them than show up at a town hall.
I listened to his telephone town hall on Tuesday, and it was a real snooze. It was really boring, and it was also hard to get in on. So I very much doubt if those are effective.
Brian can help us with this, but because it's been some time since I've been to a Claire McCaskill town hall. But the ones I attended years ago, she'd have the questions written out on cards.
Exactly
same
the same.
thing.
Exactly.
So that is a strategy.
Okay, so the questions she got in advance?
No,
not necessarily. But she would hand out the comment cards. People would put their question. They'd go into a box. Then she would choose. She would ask somebody, "Hey, is there anybody here that will, under no circumstances, vote for me?" Okay, you get to pick what questions are coming out of that box.
Okay,
that's how she.
But the point is that you don't have people going to microphones to ask questions where they can say, "No, you're a liar. You're a bum. You're not telling the truth." So there are strategies, even in live town halls, that politicians can use to mitigate the problem of people speaking loudly or protesting. Claire McCaskill is brilliant at that. That's why she continues to have these town halls.
Well, another prominent Kansas political figure with an eye on the governor's job was getting national news attention on Fox and Friends. That after Secretary of State Chris Kobach announces his first conviction of a non-U.S. citizen for illegally voting in a Kansas election. Victor David Garcia Bebic from Peru pleaded guilty to 3 counts of voting without being qualified in Wichita. Does this vindicate Kobach, Jay Center?
I would venture to guess that most people would say no. Again, going back to the Kansas budget, when you are a state that is facing hundreds of millions of dollars in budget shortfall, the idea that you would be devoting any money at all to the issue of voter fraud, which has been shown time and time again not to have any sort of pose any sort of substantial threat to the integrity of our elections, I think probably strikes a lot of people as being wrong.
Brian.
Well, and when he announced this, he said every time a non-citizen votes, it cancels out the vote of a U.S. citizen. Well, when you only had 55% of the electorate come out in the general for 2016, that's almost a moot point. It obviously, so you took away 1 vote.
But some elections are decided by 1 vote, Dave.
Well, there have been examples of that. In fact, there was one locally in which actually 2 illegal votes may have decided a state legislative race on the Missouri side. But broadly speaking, 1 vote leaves Secretary Kobach with 2,999,999 more illegal votes to find based on his claim about Donald Trump.
Yeah, and
it's
let's
ridiculous.
not forget that in order to nab this 1 illegal voter, you have tens of thousands of Kansans whose registrations are in this limbo because of the requirements that the Kansas legislature did impose.
17 months after Mayor Sly James launched a citizens task force to examine worsening crime in Kansas City, the group finally releases its recommendations this week. Was there anything surprising in what they came up with, Dave Helling?
No, I mean, it is not surprising that the answers are diffuse, unfocused, difficult. We've talked about this so much on this program for more than a decade, Nick. The problem of violent crime in Kansas City is extraordinarily complicated. It involves urban pathologies that go far beyond access to weapons. It's jobs, it's education, it's family structure. No commission can solve that. We should not be surprised that they weren't able to do so.
Barbara, were you surprised by anything in the final recommendations after all that time?
I was interested in some of the final recommendations. The idea of putting storefront offices in some of the crime-ridden neighborhoods, I thought was something that we haven't tried, on a uniform basis. Yes, that might be worth it. The idea of a special office in City Hall focusing just on this, that's pretty interesting.
And a full-time coordinator for anti-violence programs in Kansas City was one of the recommendations, Brian.
The one thing that stood out to me is one of the recommendations: pursue state legislation to create domestic violence fatality review teams, which would convene stakeholders, offer solutions, understand the strengths and challenges of gaps in the community's response to violence. Isn't that exactly what this task force was tasked to do? That's the question I would ask.
Yeah.
Well, on that, though, I think what they're talking about is something like what we have now for child fatalities. When there's a potentially domestic violence fatality, let's look at it, see, could it have been prevented? What services were available? What was the victim connected into? I don't think that was the role of this task force, and I think that's another idea that's well worth trying.
Just very briefly, the mayor of St. Louis, inaugurated this week, was in office for 24 hours and fired the police chief in St. Louis because she thought that he was inappropriately addressing crime. Until Kansas City gets control of its police department, and holds it accountable for the problem of violent crime, we'll continue to have these kinds of discussions.
Mayor Sly James is on the television news constantly. What about the mayor of the metro's second largest city? The politics of Overland Park barely get much play compared to the turn of the screw coverage you get of everything that happens in KCMO. But this week, it's Mayor Carl Burlock officially filing for re-election. He does have an opponent, former state lawmaker Charlotte O'Hara. I do notice that this would be Gerlach's fourth term. Can you be mayor as long as you want in Overland Park, Jay?
Well, you know, he was unopposed the past two election cycles. And frankly, things look pretty good, right? In Overland Park, you get named all these, you know, national rankings of places with most livability, great school districts, all things like this. Charlotte O'Hara is going to make this election about tax incentives. It has become de rigueur for a developer to come to the city council and say, boy, we would love to build this beautiful new development, but we're going to need $150 million in tax incentives from you. She doesn't like that.
You've been looking at this race extensively too, Brian. Is it just about tax incentives, or is there other divisions there in Overland Park we need to be aware of?
I think that's going to be the major factors. Is the electorate there in Overland Park a one or two issue electorate? And Gerlach's going to argue, no, take a look at infrastructure, take a look at public safety. Here's all the things that make, as Jay is saying, a great place to live. And then that's also kind of plays into Charlotte's wheelhouse of, if it's such a great place to live, then why do we have to give these tax incentives out in order for businesses to come here? Shouldn't they want to come here anyways? So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation moving forward.
You know, this week KCPT hosted a town hall at the Plaza Library on the future of transit in our metro, and somebody was asking, why is it that we don't hear about streetcar expansion in Overland Park with a line, say, running to Oak Park Mall? Why is it this is only a KCMO conversation? Is there any interest there on the Johnson County side?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the history of Johnson County, I mean, this was new development suburbs where people were sort of trying to escape the urbanity, right, and all the traffic and congestion and noise and all that stuff. I don't think there's much of a tradition or history of public transportation in the area, and so the idea of spending millions of dollars on building a system out there may not have much legs.
By the way, you can see that town hall on the future of transit and other infrastructure issues next Friday at 7:30 in a special hour-long edition of this program. And that's our Week in Review. Our thanks to Barbara Shelley and Brian Abel, and from the Shawnee Mission Post, Jay Center and the Star's Dave Helling. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.